Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, coverage from the annual Defense News Conference held in the nation's capital. We gathered an assortment of national security experts to speak on a host of topics, including the volatile relationship between the U.S. and China. How can the Trump administration deter threats in the Indo-Pacific? Plus, are stalled American shipbuilding efforts stirring concern amongst allies? And what steps can U.S. forces take to counter cyber threats? Coming to you from Washington, D.C., it's the latest in news and analysis, from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. The relationship between the U.S. and China is of paramount importance to achieving peace and security in the Indo-Pacific. In our first panel from DNC 2025, we asked experts how the U.S. and its allies can prepare for threats in the region. Have a look.
We're here for a conversation this morning all about the crucial relationship between the United States as well as China, which, as we all know in this room, it remains a defining challenge and arguably one of the most important we have in our modern world. We begin this conversation by setting the stage. Marcus, I'll kick things off with you. What do you see as the greatest risk of miscalculation in the Indo-Pacific today?
So I think the risk of miscalculation is really driven by a lack of focus on the interconnectivity of all the threats and challenges that we face in the region. When you look at Russia, North Korea, and China collectively as one set of threat actors and how they mutually support each other, I think that's the part that we're missing the most. When you look at the amount of resources that are flowing back and forth between these three countries, the fact that, like Ukrainian military intelligence is reporting, 40% of the munitions being used by Russia and Ukraine are actually coming from North Korea, and you can only imagine what is coming back to North Korea in exchange and what that would mean for North Korea's capabilities. When you look at the fact that anything that happens on the Korean Peninsula immediately has China interested and involved. Certainly, the South and East China Seas, Taiwan, these are all under threat, but the potential for a crisis there to spread into a larger regional confrontation, including North Korea and Russia, is vastly underestimated. And then conversely, a crisis in the Pacific could start with say, Russian actions against Japan or North Korean actions against South Korea. And this is something I think that we underestimate. It's that we prepare for a particular war, but what happens in reality, often it's the war that we're not expecting that's the problem. And then underlying all this, I think, is another really huge concern in terms of capability and intentions, and that is the potential for the next crisis to have a huge nuclear element. When you look at what's happened in the Russian war against Ukraine, the way that the Russians have wielded nuclear coercion, used their nuclear capability to cause hesitation in the Western allies, that's a big factor. And then when you see China's nuclear buildup, you see North Korea transitioning from what some described as a no first use policy to what I would describe as a use early and often policy. And then you have just this effect of the nuclear element just so much more coming to the forefront. That really raises the risk that our adversaries could become overconfident and that any crisis could actually escalate into a nuclear confrontation.
Christian, how about the same question for you? What do you see as being this current risk of miscalculation after Marcus did such a great job laying out many of the stakes involved?
Yeah, I think Marcus's answer is absolutely correct. I would add to it by saying that the state of competition between the U.S. and China is a continuous state. We sometimes look at it as responses that we would have to just when a crisis happens, but actually it needs to be looked at more holistically because the competition is continuous, and it also exists in other domains. And so, for example, when you go to talk to leaders in countries in Southeast Asia, a lot of the issues that they have, a lot of the concerns that they have related to China is about economic retaliation. And so a lot of the policy responses that the United States might have needs to include all elements of national power. It needs to include not just the military domain, but the economic domain, because that is something that's of great concern to those countries.
Yeah. Lisa, how about for you?
Yeah, well, I think they have laid out the risk of miscalculation, and it's certainly there. But I think what I would like to talk about is the importance of working with our allies and partners to manage that risk. And here, I think that the Trump administration is at risk of focusing too narrowly on tariffs and trade, and that could disrupt some of our alliances and partnerships that are so critical to deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. I think, there are some countries where the Trump administration, I think, is doing a good job, and I would put the Philippines in this category. We saw a very successful visit by the Defense Secretary to the Philippines. We saw a successful visit of President Marcos Jr. to the White House. So we've seen a lot of commitment to the Philippines. We've seen military commitment in terms of building up the Philippines' defense capabilities, and a commitment, within the budget. The House Foreign Ops Appropriations Bill, they're putting forth a commitment to supplying the Philippines. And of course, there has also been a diplomatic commitment to the U.S., Japan, Philippines trilateral relationship. We've seen that Secretary of State Rubio has already held a meeting with his counterparts in Japan and the Philippines, and this is very much a part of the Trump administration's strategy. So I think, in terms of building up that networked security architecture in the Indo-Pacific, the Trump administration is doing the right thing on the Philippines. I think one of the mistakes that I see being made is the alienation of India.
An open question for all of you. How likely is an unintended escalation between U.S. and China around Taiwan or the South China Sea?
Yeah, I think we worry too much about unintended escalation and don't worry enough about intentional escalation. And the willingness of the PRC, of North Korea, of Russia to escalate and challenge us to respond, to create dilemmas for us. That is my biggest concern and should be our biggest concern. There's always the potential for an accident, for a collision and these sorts of things, but it's only under the conditions where the adversary is pushing the envelope that these things have the potential to spiral into actual conflict. I'm much more confident in our ability in the event of an unintentional move to be able to back away and de-escalate than I am confident in our ability to actually effectively counter the adversary if they decide to escalate intentionally. And I think that the danger is our adversaries will often try and make it look like we're the ones provoking the situation, or that the way the situation is developing risks spiraling out of control to cause us to hesitate. And so it's that perception of accidental escalation, accidental move to conflict that our adversaries leverage against us to be able to achieve their ends. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I do agree that Beijing's actions have set the stage for potentially intentional escalation, given for example, their recent exercises where they're increasingly exercising paramilitary forces in the gray zone, using their Coast Guard to control the air and maritime space around Taiwan. And these are all observable indicators of something like potentially a soft quarantine type situation where the burden of escalation then would fall on the United States and allies and partners, for example, because if China decides to start restricting imports into Taiwan or restricting the airspace or maritime space around Taiwan, it becomes very challenging to know how to respond without escalating that into an armed conflict, and Beijing is well aware of that. So I do think that that is also, by the way, a risky situation for China to get itself into as well, because if we do end up, confronting it, then it could end up in an armed conflict. But I do worry that Beijing might decide that the risk is acceptable to do something like that, and then we are in a situation of, trying to figure out what to do without escalating this into a broader conflict.
When we come back, how can the Navy reorient amid ongoing shipbuilding struggles? Don't miss it. Welcome back. A pivotal piece of a powerful Navy is a strong maritime industrial base. In our next conversation from the Defense News Conference, we asked experts how the U.S. can revamp its presence at sea. Check it out.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to talk about the state of shipbuilding and the Navy's fleet. And I think it's fair to say that shipbuilding is struggling right now. Let's start off, Brent. Can you just tell us what you're seeing here in the U.S., what are you hearing from allies, and what are the dangers of falling behind in shipbuilding?
Great question, and thanks for the chance to talk about perhaps one of my biggest passion projects since I left the Navy in 2020. That is trying to revive America's maritime industrial base. So where we are right now in the grand plan, which is, quite frankly, a bipartisan and a national effort. There's a lot of public support for this reindustrialization. It's the attracting of foreign capital to then also try to incentivize and attract even more American capital into this very atrophied, languishing sector. And that's kind of one of the first ingredients, and that's starting. You saw that with Hanwha and the Philadelphia shipyard. There's a lot of speculation that's going on. 3 years ago, shipyards could have been bought at a steal. That's not the case anymore, as capital is starting to search for investments. And that's good as you try to grow out the industrial base and also to build out the workforce. So we're at that phase now, and with the president's very explicit and consistent, sustained attention to this national endeavor, it's also having another synergistic effect. They're getting also a lot more activity and planning into new shipyards as well as brownfield type shipyards. Navy, on the other hand, is going to take a little longer time. You have shipyards that I think I must have turned off the microphone. The Navy is going to take a little longer because it's an exquisite design and requirements. You have nuclear-powered ships. It's not going to be easy to get new capacity for that, and that's going to take time. But you've got the Maritime Action Plan, which is coming out from the executive order from April for regaining America's maritime dominance. The end of the year, by November 16th, this is action plan. We should see before then some maritime prosperity zones to also incentivize. Those decisions hopefully are still going forward. And again, when it comes to building Navy, that's where we need to get more ships in the water, and we're going to be led to, I think, exploring new ways of fabrication. We're not at that yet, but you can hear some of it with the unmanned ships, and there's a lot of new entrants into that sector. Saronic gets a lot of attention, Anduril's another one. These are all, the first step is come in with a small or medium-sized unmanned vessel, but eventually they can progress in a crawl, walk, run up in the chain of larger warships. So there's a lot of things going on. We're in the first step of this, attract capital and make the investments. Hopefully before the end of the year, we see some ground broken on new yards or expansion of existing. $5 billion is going into Hanwha, or from Hanwha into Philly. I think there's more coming.
Okay, and you sound a little optimistic, but what are you hearing? You just were on a trip. What are you hearing from allies? Are they concerned with our levels? Have they expressed any sort of doubt in our partnerships with them?
Yeah, so if you saw my article yesterday in the Washington Times, there is a deep concern. While I'm an incurable optimist, and again, if you look over in the lifetime, this is a very unique amount of interest. You've got Congress, you've got the president, and you have allies. And so I already mentioned South Korea's Hanwha. Of course, you've got Hyundai and you've got Samsung also that are entering into it. And then you've got, of course, the Italians, Fincantieri, the Australians, Austal, all very much engaged. We can talk AUKUS, because that's a part of this whole thing as well. So the allies and the partners and even some of the foreign shipping companies in Maersk, CGM, CMA, as well as MSC, and even looking at the Greek families that run a lot of the LNG carriers, they all need a signal that this is going to be sustained. And this is where what's missing is getting the actual executors. So this is the Maritime Administrator. Hopefully in a week or two that'll be resolved, but we need to get Steve Carmel in his job and actually driving and executing the president's plan. Over in the Pentagon, we've got, of course, the Secretary of the Navy, but his lead shipbuilder, of course, Jason Potter is an old friend of mine, is actually there working, but the RDA, the Assistant Secretary, is not named yet. So we need a shipbuilder. So we need a few key players, and we need that signal to be consistent, because we're at the risk of losing the momentum that's been building over the last couple of years.
Cynthia, what are you seeing? I mean, you've written that we're in a state of emergency right now. Kind of lay that down for all of our audience.
I will say that, let me first follow on with something that Brent said about the sustained energy that he's seen for the past couple of years and the growing energy. The challenges in U.S. shipbuilding are by no means new. They've certainly been, this has been a concern for as long as I've been working on defense industrial issues, so 25, 30 years. What is different today is the level of senior leader, executive level interest in ensuring that the United States has the shipbuilding industry that it needs to compete and to prevail. President Trump's has a sustained interest on this in his public statements. He does seem to focus on what's really important about keeping the U.S. shipbuilding industry healthy. So that, I think, offers an opportunity for the right kind of investment in shipbuilding, because it's not a simple challenge. It can't be solved with just one tweak. We need the Navy, we need the U.S. Executive branch and the Navy on board with a focus on making the kinds of investments, the consistent investments and longer-term multi-year contracts with shipbuilders. We need Congress to support that. We need a clear understanding of what the challenges are. For example, the challenges in shipbuilding are not only at the prime contractor level, they're also throughout the supply chain. Since COVID and since the Russia's war in Ukraine has revealed challenges in the U.S. Supply chain, we have a new focus on the importance, not just the first level, but all the way down. So that's another issue. The workforce challenge, it's not that shipyards can't recruit workers, but the shipbuilding work is physical, it's hard, it's outside in unair-conditioned facilities. So what kind of new techniques can be used to attract and maintain a shipbuilding workforce? But really, a lot of this is dependent on multi-year, longer-term contracts to the shipbuilders so that they have the incentives to invest in upgrades to the shipyards. Yeah. So I am seeing a clear understanding of the importance of shipbuilding and the importance of solving the challenge on many levels.
Next up, our financial expert is back with tips to avoid getting scammed out of your hard-earned cash. Don't go away. Welcome back. Did you just win an 8-day all-expenses-paid cruise to the Bahamas via email? Don't go clicking that link just yet. On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with tips for avoiding financial scams.
Older adults are a favorite target for scams. Whether it's a fake tech support call or someone pretending to be a grandchild in trouble, scammers steal more than just money. They steal your identity and your peace of mind. So arm yourself with ways you and your family can stay ahead of the game. Be wary of urgent requests. If someone's rushing you to send money or personal info, don't. No legit organization will pressure you into quick decisions. Got a call from someone claiming to be from the government or your bank? Real agencies don't ask for gift cards or wire transfers. Hang up and call back using official numbers. And watch out for emotional traps. Scammers love to tug at your heartstrings, claiming a loved one is in trouble. Before you send anything, call that loved one directly. Better safe than sorry. And never share your Social Security number, Medicare ID, or bank details over the phone unless you started the call. In all cases, your best defense is staying informed. Chat with friends and family, share tips, and keep each other in the loop. Remember, scammers thrive on silence, so speak up and protect what matters.
To get more coverage of military and defense topics, target your precision-guided missile at militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most clever coastie on the cutter, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning bringing you the most recent headlines. And if social media is how you stay up to date, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And we're on TikTok, so go follow us there as well. When we come back, we wrap our coverage from the 2025 Defense News Conference. Stick around. Welcome back. In a 21st century war, it's increasingly important to master the cyber domain. In our final panel from the 2025 Defense News Conference, we got an update from Senator Mike Rounds on the U.S.'s work towards this goal.
I know at the start of the year you talked about, you put out a statement, said we must make certain the Department of Defense has the personnel and tools to respond swiftly and decisively to cyber attacks, as well as the ability to conduct offensive cyber operations when the situation dictates. So my question for you is, how are we doing? I mean, how is that going? Do you feel like things are moving in the right direction? Because this is one of the quickest moving threats, quickest evolving threats that the Defense Department finds. Is the department up for keeping up with it?
Remember, you have 5 domains now that we're defending in: air, land, and sea, space, and cyberspace. The area in which our adversaries are probably going to be the most active will be in cyberspace, because it's the least expensive, and it is the most, and it's the easiest way to get inside all of the defenses and offensive capabilities that would be in all of the other domains. And so for adversaries, particularly China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, they will focus on using cyber to get in and to try to get into our other offensive and defensive systems. The DoDN is huge. It has literally 1 million different entry points in and out. It's the one that they're going to try to get into to find out what they can. That is an ongoing thing. I do believe that we have the technical capabilities to defend the DoDN, the defense network. The question is whether or not we have not only the capability, but the capacity. And I think that's where we really need to work. It's one thing to have the capacity or the capability to do it. It's another thing to actually have the resources dedicated to having enough of the capability to defend everywhere and from all angles. The other side of it is that if you're only defending and you are not providing deterrence, at some point, all the bad guys got to do is get in once and they can wreak havoc. So we also need to be able to deter, which includes having offensive cyber operations equal to or better than everybody else in the world. I think we've got a lot of that right now. The question is going to be, number one, when do you deploy it? And this is one of the things that is going to be an ongoing discussion always. At what point do you actually utilize an offensive capability? And once you've done it, do you have the other offensive capabilities? Because with cyber, once you use it, they can then patch against it. And at that point, then you got to go out and find another way to get into other people's systems. So it's very selectively used, but we do have the capability. Now the question is the capacity. So we worry about that.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.